Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up the month of August, and the month of August is a big one. I'm going to try and keep this short because I do have some vlogs, but it is my biggest reading month since April 2020, since I was furloughed. And I did this with a full-time job, with plans. How did I do it? I do not know. I'm pretty daunted by this stack of books next to me. Like, I don't know how I managed to read this many books in 1 month. Piling them all up looks mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling. I'll do the stats, run through some of the things I got up to, and we will just get into this whole thing. In the month of August, I read 12 books, coming to a total of 5,317 pages. I went big. I don't think I have surpassed 5,000 pages in a long time. It wasn't quite my biggest reading month ever. That still goes to April 2020, but I was only like 200 pages short. And that month, I wasn't working. So I am very impressed with myself. I feel like big pat on the back to me for somehow doing this, somehow reading this many books and that many pages as well. So 9 of the books were fantasy, 2 of them were romance and 1 was a sci-fi. 9 of the books were adult and 3 were YA, and of the star ratings, again, these are all very high. It was quantity and it was quality. So I had 1 5-star, 3 4.5 stars, which I think on most of those I rounded up to 5 on Goodreads, 5 4 stars, 2 3.5 stars, and 1 3 stars. So there wasn't anything that I actively disliked. I enjoyed everything that I read. There's a couple of like 3.5s that I might not necessarily remember or like think too much on in a few months time, but a very solid reading month. Very solid. I finished 1 series, I continued in 1 series, and I started 1 new series, which leaves my on the go at the same at 29, I believe. And I also did a lot of rereading in August, and I reread 3 books, which were all part of series, in the anticipation that I will then continue on and finish those series. So lots of rereads. Things I got up to. So it was a calmer month, I'd say, in general. At the beginning of the month, I got offered my new job at work, so I handed in my notice, which is very exciting. It is an internal move, but I am very excited to be changing roles, and I'm a little bit nervous about it now. I feel as though it's coming up. Just 1 month left until I start my new job, and things get probably very busy. So yes, I did get offered that at the very beginning of August, which probably then set me up for success and put me in a very good mood for the month. I had some family visiting, and we went up to Cambridge all together as a family, and we also did the boat over to Greenwich and showed them there. So my cousin and sister were staying over for a couple of days, but otherwise I think I've had some calmer weekends. As you may have noticed by the vlogs that I put out, that I did have some weekends where I didn't have so much on, so I was able to read quite a bit. And I think doing those weekend reading vlogs really encouraged me and helped me to read a lot of books over a smaller period of time, and I think they've really beefed up these numbers a little bit. So I think I will just go quickly over those books that I covered in those vlogs, as I do have full videos talking in depth about them, and then I'll get into the ones which I haven't spoken about in any previous videos. So the first vlog at the beginning of the month, I was working through The Mask of Mirrors and The Liar's Knot, which are the first 2 books in the Rook and Rose trilogy by M.A. Carrick. These are both rereads for me. I've been loving my reread of this series, and it's made me so excited to get into Labyrinth's Heart, which is the 3rd book, which I do own. I just haven't got to it quite yet. But I was listening to these as audiobooks. In this series, we are following a main character, Renata, who is a con artist as she infiltrates one of the merchant families in this world. It has lots of political machinations, it has lots of relationship drama between the different ruling families within the city, seeing the different classes within the city, and it's a very Venetian inspired world. So the setting is these canals flowing through this city. I really like the way that this is written. I find it so transportative. Some of the scenes in these books I love reading. Like, they're so fun to read. So I had a great time rereading both of these. The Mask of Mirrors I've given 5 stars, and The Liar's Knot 4.5. I think I've increased my rating on both of these. I think originally this was 4.5 and this was 4, but they've both gone up half a star because I had so much fun rereading these, and I would really strongly recommend them both. Also in that vlog, I read Tress of the Emerald Sea, the first of the Secret Projects by Brandon Sanderson. This was so much fun. If you want like a cozy, fun adventure fantasy, this is the book for you. It was great. I mean, we followed Tress as she leaves her island to go in search of the boy that she loves, and it is the adventures that she gets up to along the way. It was adventurous, it was fun, it was so quick and easy to fly through. It felt like a different writing style, I'd say, to the other Sanderson books that I'd read. It does form part of the Cosmo, but I think you can pretty much read it as a standalone by itself. There are a couple of minor spoilers, I'd say, for the first era of Mistborn, but that's about it. This was so much fun to read. And then I also read A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid in that vlog, which this is a dark academia fairy tale-esque book as we follow our main character Effie, who is an architecture student. And at the beginning of the book she sees an advertisement for one of her favourite authors who has recently died, and his family are wanting to have his home renovated, and she ends up going down there and visiting the house in order to try and renovate it. But when she's there, things go a little bit awry. We also meet Preston, who is a literature student who is also there investigating this author. It combines these elements of gothic and dark academia with these fairy tale elements and this macabre and knowing what's real and what's not real. I really enjoyed this one. Again, I feel it's a very positive reading month. Very, very positive. I think I compared this to like Mexican Gothic meets Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which are very, very different books, and I feel as though that's what this book combines. And then the final book that I read over that weekend was Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith, volume 3 for this one, the third book in this webcomic series, which is a Hades and Persephone retelling in graphic novel form with a lovely, lovely colour scheme. I love the blues and the pinks and the purples. Like, I think they're just very aesthetically pleasing, and obviously this was very, very fun and quick to read. So those are a very quick whistle-stop tour of that first vlog. Obviously a lot more full thoughts there, so go check that one out. And then the other vlog that I did, the other weekend of reading that I did, I read a further 4 books over that weekend. So I have The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni, which is the start of a YA trilogy where we are following our main character Kiva, who at a very young age was taken into this prison, and but over the years becomes the healer there. And at the start of this book, there are 2 new inmates that are inducted into this prison. One of them is a young male, and one of them is the rebel queen, and Kiva is told, keep the rebel queen alive. Keep her alive or else. But the rebel queen is on her deathbed, and she is being put into some trials. We follow these trials as they go on, and I love a trial. I do love a trial. I find them so compulsively readable. So I found this really fun, engaging, quick, compulsively readable. It was very, very compulsively readable. And I read this with my friend Vish from Books with V and our friend Sam. It was a lot of fun, I think, for all of us. That I think we all said it's probably not going to be the most memorable book. Potentially it won't stick with us, but it was a lot of fun at the time of reading, and it was so compulsively readable that we're definitely going to be continuing on with the series. I also read Thorne Hedge by T. Kingfisher. This is my second T. Kingfisher, and weirdly enough that my friend Sam, who I read The Prison Healer with, also read this on the same day as me. That he messaged in the later half of the day saying he'd just finished T. Kingfisher, and it was like as I was starting the book, and I was like, how have we gone from buddy reading The Prison Healer to buddy reading Thorne Hedge, and this one we hadn't even communicated about? What just weird coincidences when your brains work in the same way. But this is my second book by T. Kingfisher. I read Nettle and Bone last year, and I really enjoyed this one. It was like the perfect fairy tale-esque atmosphere. It was atmospheric. It was woodsy, and we're following a main character, Toadling, who is tasked with keeping the Sleeping Beauty within the castle, and we follow her as she deals with this task, and so it's from her perspective as someone is trying to break into the forest and get to the tower to save the Sleeping Beauty. I flew through. I mean, it's very short, but I flew through it, and I would really recommend it. I don't know how T. Kingfisher managed to fit so much into a 125-page novella, but she did. I think it's now like one of my favourite novellas. Like, it's up there with Emperor's Soul. It was that good. It was so good. Also during that weekend, I listened to the audiobook of Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore, which is a historical romance set during the suffragette movement as we follow our main character Annabelle as she becomes one of the first women to attend Oxford, and as she meets the Duke Sebastian Devereux, who is one of the more highbrow members of society, and he potentially will have the power to sway the vote towards women. Now this one I think was a fine audiobook. Like, I had no issues listening to it. I found it a fine audiobook. It was engaging, it was relatively quick to get through. I didn't have any struggles with it. I didn't have anything that I struggled with in listening to this audiobook. I don't think it necessarily did anything wrong, but I was never hooked. I was never addicted to this story. I was never really like compelled to see how Annabelle and Sebastian's romance was going to develop. It didn't quite tick the boxes. I don't know what boxes it was missing, but it didn't quite do all the ticks. And I think it's just relatively forgettable for me, unfortunately. It was fine, it was fun, but not memorable. And then the final book that I read during that weekend, and slightly extended weekend, was One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. This is one of her standalones that has been republished by Tor, so it was originally self-published, and this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but with Russian-inspired influences of Baba Yaga and Koshi the Deathless, set in New York as we follow these rival witch families and the tragedy of their disagreements and romances. This one I think had such a strong start and it had a strong ending, but I think the middle dragged on just a little bit. That I was really hooked for probably the majority of the book, but I think it probably could have been tightened up a little bit more in the middle, that some of the scenes just went on probably a little bit too long. Would be my only critiques of this one. That it was definitely enjoyable. I definitely had a good time with it in the main, and actually I think I had a better time than I expected I was going to have, because typically I'm not a fan of Romeo and Juliet. It drives me, the tragedy of it, and I'm just like, you were children, why have you gone and killed yourselves? Like, grow up. But actually I feel as though she took the inspiration and then she went her own way with it, which I liked, and I did like where it all got to, and I did find it a satisfying read, and I did find the writing very engaging. It felt a little bit less pretentious than some of the other books that I've read by her. So I've also read The Atlas Six and Alone with You in the Ether, and I found this was less pretentious than that it was more easy. It was easier to read. Solid, but could have been tightened in the middle. So those are all the books that I have vlogged on. One of my other rereads was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, the first book in the Skyward series. This is a sci-fi story following the main character Spencer, who wants to become a fighter pilot for her planet and fight against the Krell, which is the alien force that are attacking them. However, she has been constantly deterred because how many years ago her father turned coward, and so she has this stigma of his cowardice hovering over her, and so the people that rule are refusing to give her that position. And so we follow her, and we follow her in flight school and the things that go on with the Krell. I loved this book. I found this book so fun. I read this quite a few years ago, I think when it first came out in 2018, 2019, when it was originally published, and I adored it at the time. I think I gave it 5 stars at the time. I've left my rating as 5 stars on Goodreads. I don't know if it's more like a 4.5, but 4.5, maybe a 5, because it's so fun. It's so fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and I had such a good time reading this. I read it with my friend Brittany, and then we actually met up last weekend and had a brunch together, discussed it, which I found very fun to regroup after having read a book. And although we messaged at the time to discuss it in person, I found this book, so again, very compulsively readable. I feel like that's been the thing this month. I've had lots of compulsively readable books that do not want to get put down. They do not want to be put down. They want to be in my hands being read, or in my ears, because I did also listen to a lot of audiobooks this month. That's probably one of the reasons why I managed to read so much, is that I did a lot of both physical and audio reading. My reread of this definitely lived up to my previous expectations of it. It held up to that first time that I read it, and I'm looking forward to getting into Starsight as well, and then continuing on this series. And I really hope the books that I haven't read, so Cytonic and the Short Stories, also live up to this first one. I finished a series this month. I did. I finished the last argument of Kings and the First Law trilogy. Tick, success. This book probably took me the longest amount of time in the month. This one took me quite a little while to read, actually. I read this one physically with my eyeballs, and I actually felt like this one took ages, and I was like, wow, my reading has been the best month ever, and then it really slowed down, and then I had that big reading weekend right at the end, whereas this one took me like 2 weeks in the middle to read. And I enjoyed it, but I think it is my least favourite out of the trilogy. I think my order would go Before They Are Hanged, The Blade Itself, and then Last Argument of Kings. I feel as though this one just dragged on a little bit, unfortunately. I mean, I think it was still very good. Like, I think I've still given this one like 4 stars. Like, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading from our characters' perspectives, but it did feel like it was never going to end at times. That there was a lot of fighting and then lots of jumping between different fight scenes. I do feel mostly satisfied, I'd say, with the ending. It's a little bit open, but I do know that there is a lot more to go within this world and within the wider universe of the First Law. And so I feel mostly satisfied, I'd say, with where this got to. I was always invested in our characters and see what was happening with them, but it did feel like it went on a little bit too long. I think it could have, I don't know if it could have been shortened somehow or other, and maybe towards the end as well. Like, I feel as though everything finished and then we just kept going on and on and on a little bit after the ending, which isn't to say that I didn't enjoy it, because I feel as I'm just giving negatives here, because I did enjoy it. I did. I gave it like a 4 stars. I think I really hoped that this one was going to be like the 5 stars that brought the whole series all together and was like the favourite of the series, and that I didn't really want my high to be Before They Are Hanged. Like, I enjoyed Before They Are Hanged, but I didn't want that one to be the high. I wanted this one to be the high of the series. And then actually the book that I read at the beginning of the month, but seems to be the one that I'm talking about last, is Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent, which I actually started in July and then just finished in August. And this is a fantasy romance story set in the same world as the Serpent and the Wings of Night series that I've been reading and adoring. And I don't think it's not quite the same level as that. Like, I didn't love it in the same way that I loved The Serpent and the Wings of Night, but I did really, really enjoy this one. In this, we're following the main character Silana, who has been raised by this cult, and she has been taken from this, like, being this orphan street rat into being this homed killer, and she has been tasked now with killing the vampire conqueror. So she is infiltrating his army with the anticipation to then lead him down a certain path and then kill him. But is it really going to go that way when it's a fantasy romance? Of course not. So I enjoyed their dynamic. I enjoyed seeing Silana's growth and seeing how she looks back on her upbringing as we go through the book, and seeing the different twists and turns that we go through. And I liked how this is hopefully going to flow into the wider world that we start to see in The Serpent and the Wings of Night. So I feel as though I expect these characters will come up again in later books in the Crowns of Neaxia series, and I definitely intend to read more Carissa Broadbent because I've had so much fun reading her books this year. So those are all the books I finished in the month of August, all 12 of them. I also did start La Vérité sur les Faits Hubert, which is a mystery thriller book where many years ago a young girl goes missing and her body has now been found, and we are looking into the case of that and seeing who killed her. So I have started this, got like 100-ish pages in before the end of August, and I'm going to continue this one over the month of September. So slowly reading this one as well, but didn't get that far in August. There we go. And I feel as though that stack of books is very, very daunting, but I will hold it up. There are all of the books that I read in the month of August. We'll see how I do in September. I definitely do not think I'm going to read anywhere near as much as I read in August. I feel like it might be a one-off high and best month of the year, and then we go down from here potentially. But I'm very, very happy with how much I read. Let me know how your reading in August went, if you had a good reading month or if I stole all of the reading energy from you, and if you've read any of these books and your thoughts on them. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!